Good evening, everybody, and welcome to a special episode of The Guys Who Stare at Stats. I'm Cade Kennedy, joined by a special guest we have today. I've been building it up over the course of a week. Somewhat important to my life, I would say, in terms of helping me get into the radio business and everything else of that such. But before we get into that, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, whether you're on NWTV7 or The Guys Who Stare at Stats. And as always, leave a comment. We love hearing comments from everybody. No matter where you're from, we want to hear your perspective on what we talk about today. So now, on with the rest of the show. So it is my pleasure to introduce someone who has been important to my life, as I've said, in terms of doing this, getting to do things like this, and helping me learn the ropes, I guess you'd say. My good friend, Tyler Riggs. Tyler, welcome aboard to the show.
Hey, thanks, kid. I'm touched there. I'm just a guy. I talk, so.
Hey, you're the guy to me, so.
It's good to hear. But no, yeah, honored to be on with some we've been trying to kind of set up over the last, I'd say about a month or so. So good to get on it. Boy, we picked a great day to be able to do it, man.
This is the one thing we were originally scheduled to do this Tuesday because I thought, okay, the Deshaun Watson trial begins. We got Baker Mayfield coverage. We've got a whole bunch of stuff today, and Connor in the chat saying, what's up? Hello to you, too. How about that? Just a side track on that. Connor goes out to Los Angeles for 2 days. He goes to an Angels game and, the whole brawl there.
Yes.
And then he goes to Disneyland, and then you get the whole state explodes with UCLA and USC. We'll have to get into that in a little bit. But
is Connor the chaos that follows? Is that what we're talking about here?
That's my line of thinking. Is that we need to keep Connor in the state of California, and maybe the Lakers will cease to exist as a franchise.
Very possible the way things are going.
They might trade for KD. They might put KD and Westbrook on the same team. If we put Connor in crypto arena for a little bit, because it seems to follow him around. I don't know if he's the agent of chaos himself or what.
He might be.
Put him out there for a little bit. He'll be back for our August shows. He's out there serving an internship in the Golden State. And speaking of Golden State, we'll talk about them a little on later in the show. There's not really a whole lot of moves with them, but hey, they are the defending champs. You got to talk about them a little bit.
Yeah, and we could talk about some of the potential moves they have because they're kind of, I was talking about this with a colleague today. You're going to see them be quiet in this probably next 24-hour period in terms of the free agency moves and all that, but they do have quite a bit to figure out in their own roster.
Yeah, it is. That is the one thing with the NBA, though. There's never any dull moment, I guess you'd say.
They have done a phenomenal job of, similar to the NFL, where there is no offseason for them now, right?
Yes.
You have the finals, then you go straight into the draft. Now you have free agency, and before you know it, you might have just a touch of a dead period with training camps and whatnot, but even then you got rookies to follow, the summer league. They do a great job of marketing that. So, yeah, NBA has done a fantastic job with that.
I mean, I have called it the world's greatest soap opera for a long time
now.
And that's to me because it is. You put just so much drama in one season. It targeted at really everyone. You don't even have to be a fan of basketball to enjoy some of the drama of, someone being petty or not wanting to play with this teammate or thinking this guy can't win a championship. Or, if you're Charles Barkley talking about bus drivers. It goes on forever and ever and will never end. It will just continue to keep going and going, and that is the cycle of the NBA. And, it's a fun cycle to be a part of.
No, it is. It really is. And you mentioned just the bus driver stuff and all that. NBA social media, whether it's Twitter, Instagram. I'm on Twitter a lot. I'm a Twitter guy.
There you go.
But, God, you want to talk about toxic, yet some of the most hilarious you got, LeBron stands or whoever. You'll see a tweet about something on SportsCenter. Take, for example, they'll tweet out about USC, UCLA, which we'll get to, and under it, somebody will talk, have the whole copy pasta of the LeBron, either Mickey Mouse rings or, something. That's just how it is on NBA Twitter, man. So it's a different world.
My favorite was always this is why LeBron is the GOAT.
Yes, yeah. Well, they'll battle in the comments on anything. It's crazy.
My favorite was always, I think it was when Kansas beat Texas, someone said this is why LeBron is the GOAT. And you see a bunch of OU people look for us like, you know what? I'll agree with this for once.
Yeah, why not?
We all have our own opinions, but hey, if Kansas could beat Texas and LeBron was somehow connected, he deserves to be called the GOAT in my eyes for that. I mean, we could talk about NBA Twitter forever, but we're not here to talk about NBA Twitter,
No.
even though we could do a whole show on that.
Yeah, it's another show.
We are here to get into NBA free agency instead, the key component of life in the NBA, the blood of the offseason, and it never sleeps. We'll get the Summer League in a few days that starts up as well. But I want to go all the way back to, well, I don't know how far you want to go back. We can go as far back as, the draft night if we really wanted to. But I want to get to about what happened involving a certain Kevin Durant about 1:54 Central Time. The big news coming out that Kevin Durant officially demanding a trade from the Brooklyn Nets, and then the Phoenix Suns and the Miami Heat being the top two potential suitors for Kevin Durant. Now, this didn't really surprise me on the Phoenix side because I figured with all the DeAndre Ayton wanting to move him, you have Chris Paul, you have Devin Booker, you had a, unexpected ending getting blown out at home by Dallas in Game 7 of the second round.
I saw that sly smile.
Hey,
he's smiling.
Listen,
about that
It
one.
ain't a sly smile. It's a happy smile. It's a big old smile for me as a Mavs fan. I mean, you probably didn't see the episode. I busted out the old 80s hat for that one.
Man.
I busted out the retro hat for the Mavs winning and then talked about how, look out Golden State and then, look out Golden State for a different reason.
Yeah, Steph Curry hit you with the sleep. But it's different conversation.
He did that to everyone. He did that to everyone. And Phoenix has got a lot of moves to make, I think. They're the team that I think I'm most interested to see what they do because of how last year went, being kind of the favorite, I would say, most of the year, even through injuries, able to overcome any obstacles. And now you're in the running for one of the best players in the league currently.
Well, and to kind of expand on that a bit, in the immediate aftermath of KD requesting a trade, you had Adrian Wojnarowski, you had Brian Windhorst kind of talking about not only those destinations, Phoenix and Miami, but what it would take to get KD there. I think it was Windhorst, I believe, was talking that Phoenix essentially eternally is saying, we don't want to give up Devin Booker. Brooklyn saying, if we're giving you KD, you got to at least give us Devin Booker. And so Phoenix kind of responded, I guess, by signing Devin Booker to a $214 million extension. So that kind of seals that chess piece. But now I guess it becomes a salesmanship game for Phoenix to say, hey, can we interest you in DeAndre Ayton plus whatever role players I guess you want outside of Chris Paul? That's the real key piece. You will find out during this process whether the trade goes down or not, just because you'll hear about potential guys that are thrown into the mix for the trade, who Phoenix really views as like, okay, this is who we need to keep around Chris Paul and Devin for next year. And that's something I'm intrigued about. Miami, I think, Cade, in terms of just guys they could throw into the trade for Kevin Durant, probably has a lot more flexibility. I don't think anybody's truly untouchable other than maybe Jimmy Butler as kind of your lead guy.
Yeah.
And I like, some of their pieces, right? But those guys are all young dudes. And if you're telling me, if I'm an exec and you're saying, hey, you've got a decent collection of young guys. You got your Tyler Hero, got your Bam Adebayo. They're great. But I get KD right now with Jimmy Butler. To me, that's a contending team in the East.
Yes.
So, I mean, I don't think anybody's kind of off the market there for Miami. They might have a little bit more leeway.
And another one, I feel like we got to mention it for Andrew, who's not here being a Sixers fan. Philadelphia trying to put some pieces together. I know they mentioned Tobias Harris and Tyrese Maxey, maybe trying to throw Matisse Thybulle in there as well, trying to get some pieces for Kevin Durant. I know Embiid has been pretty much trying to put as much pressure as he can on Philadelphia. Hey, Kevin Durant's available. He's one of the best players. You've got to go out and get him, or at least make an effort to.
And what's interesting, two moves they kind of made alongside of, as you mentioned, that Embiid was making that push on social media. You had them signing P.J. Tucker to a 3-year, $33 million deal to get a veteran, if you will, that's got championship experience. And then James Harden made the move that was speculated to happen. He declined his player option of $47.1 million, but he's told essentially Philadelphia, hey, we can still renegotiate. That meeting's scheduled to take place over this weekend. So Philadelphia, another team that essentially, as much as I love a Tyrese Maxey or a Tobias Harris or some of those guys, they're all on the table to be, unless it's Joel Embiid or, if you could get Harden to kind of re-sign. Now, here's the interesting part of that, though. What does KD think about wanting to go play potentially with Harden again? If, does it come down to an F4, like, hey, if I'm going to come there, you can't re-sign James Harden? I mean, how's that break down within the camps?
That could be, and that will be another thing to look forward to. I know we got Connor. He's, can't be here. He's here in spirit, I guess you could say.
Hey, it's always good to have people in spirit.
Having him here in the chat saying Miami's going to have to give up quite a haul, he thinks, if they're going to get Kevin Durant. And I agree.
Well, anybody is. I mean, Kevin Durant, and Woj made this point, and very fairly, Kevin Durant at 34 is playing still at an elite level. You figure a guy like that's, considered arguably the best, at least offensive player that we've seen of his group, of his generation, probably has at least, 3-4 more elite years, you would say. I mean, we're seeing Chris Paul do what he's doing when he was long past his window. Kevin Durant, despite his big injury of the Achilles, otherwise has been pretty durable. He's kept himself in shape and done a good job of taking care of his body. So, yeah, if you're telling me, hey, I got to give up, like I mentioned, and it could be any team, really. It could be the Pelicans, whoever you want to throw in the scenario. I got to give up one of my young stars or my kind of prime guys, if you will, to get Kevin Durant. I'm signing up. Yeah. Because the end goal, you want to win a championship. That means mortgaging 8 years in the future for three windows, if you will, to win it, especially if you're a hungry franchise. I'm doing it.
I know another one I saw with Miami that I thought was a bit interesting because the exemption rules and things like that. I saw one where ESPN was mentioning, I can't remember what guy exactly, but they had the trade board up and everything, and that if Bam Adebayo gets traded to the Nets, because of some exemption they have, Ben Simmons would have to be dealt from Brooklyn. I can't remember what the exact rule was, but they said that Ben Simmons would have to be dealt. So maybe if they make a deal with Miami, expect a 3-team trade there, and then you turn into the whole debacle of, well, who wants Ben Simmons, considering the whole saga that has gone on with him. I'm sure someone wants him, but who would want him?
Man. Speaking of NBA Twitter,
there we go.
The toxicity here for a second. Ben Simmons today, I think it was about an hour before that trade news broke with KD demanding his trade.
I saw this.
Brooklyn posted the Instagram photo of Ben Simmons talking about, hey, grinding. Oh, man, the memes made off that one of KD saw that and he started packing his bags. I mean, the thing that mystifies me the most, I think, in all this is the fact that not only did KD let Kyrie opt in, right, and put out that ridiculous quote that he put out, is that apparently, at least according to, your Woj, your Shams, your insiders, your win horses, that relationship isn't fractured, that those guys are still really good with each other, and there's odds that they will try to be traded to the same team. So, I mean, just to think where we are in the modern NBA and where we've come from, I guess, since LeBron kind of opened the floodgates with the decision, if you will. I mean, it's nuts. Just some of the stuff that's gone on that you think in Jordan's era that this stuff would happen. Absolutely not. No. I mean,
this did not happen back then.
The players have had the most control they've ever had. It's, I gotta say, it's like you said, popcorn drama, but boy, we're here for it.
Yeah, I was about to say, could you imagine Larry Bird teaming up with like Isaiah Thomas or something like that?
Oh man!
Like, I mean, those teams would be insane to watch, but just I don't even know how that would work chemistry wise, because those are guys you competed against for nearly a decade. Now all of a sudden you're on the same team. I know.
Well, and had some malice, right? Had some legit like, hey, I don't like this dude. Now that was a lot on the court. Those guys, for the most part, off the court, kind of got along, but that world is totally different compared to what we got with modern NBA now. And I think in large part, that has to do with how much these guys, growing up on the AAU scene a lot more now compared to back then. And even when they get to the league, they're out Team USA. They're doing events for Nike or Under Armour or whoever, Reebok, whatever you want to name. And so it kind of brings them together a bit more, I think. And there's more camaraderie just as a whole within the players to say, hey, you may be on a different team, but we're both guys in the league, and we could respect that. So
and then speaking of the players, kind of keeping on that, there's something that Kendrick Perkins, I was listening to a NBA Free Agency special today, and Kendrick Perkins mentioned something that I kind of agreed with, where he talked about, even the Kevin Durant trade showing all this. This just shows how far of a player-driven league the NBA has become.
Yeah, absolutely.
That any big player, if they feel that they're in a situation they don't like, they can do whatever they want. They can have, 4 years on their contract, and he'll say, hey, I'm out of here. You're trading me now. And it'll happen. It's not like the NFL where it's, okay, you get the Deshaun Watson thing, okay, you're sitting out a year if you don't want to do that. We'll just move on and do something else. You have to trade that person. You only got 15 spots. You got to deal with something.
You either have to trade him or you have a Ben Simmons situation where you got Daryl Morey saying, well, I'll just hold on to him until the right package comes along. Two problems with that. And, Daryl Morey, I thought, for the longest was, pretty good exec. I'm not saying he's bad at this point, but I do think he gets a little bit up above himself, if you will. Because situation, I think the league learned a lot from that Ben Simmons situation. You got a guy that is clear he does not want to be there, right? And not only that, he's basically, I'm not going to take this time to bag on mental health or anything like that because teach their own. I don't know what he's going through. I'm not in the room with him. But long story short, he wasn't playing for whatever reason on top of wanting out.
Yeah.
And instead of selling high when you could, Daryl Morey said, well, I'll just hold my chips and he's an all-star, somebody will come along. It doesn't matter if there is a team that's out there. I mean, this is, to me, GM 101. We practice this on, 2K doing GM mode, right? Where if everybody knows that guy doesn't want you, why would I then turn around and overtrade for that guy knowing I could probably get him at a discount when his contract runs out or just when you get desperate enough? And sure enough, what happened. Now, to Moore's credit, still parlayed it into getting James Harden back and getting something out of it. But, my goodness, like you figure some of these teams will learn, especially in the NBA right now. Like you said, if you got an unhappy guy, it's almost better to sell high, get it over with, and get it done.
You just got to bite the bullet, essentially.
Right.
There's nothing else you can do about that situation. And getting into kind of a intriguing situation, I guess, is the best way to put it for me.
For your Mavs, yes.
Yeah, for the Mavs. I got to talk about it at some point because it is, surprisingly enough, I don't know whether it's a compliment or like a negative that Jalen Brunson is considered like the number 2 point guard in this whole free agency, or at least top 3, I think you could be able to say.
Yeah, with the re-signings we saw earlier today, right? Your Brad Beal, your Devin Booker, those guys getting re-signed. Brunson just he winds up being that guy that's like, okay, who's left? And kudos to Brunson, I will say, for making the most of his opportunity, right? And I don't know long-term what his ceiling is. Yeah. I don't know if we've seen it. His play style is kind of a little old school for a guard, where he's more of a slasher really in a lot of respects. Mm-hmm. Not to say that he can't shoot, but I just, if I'm Dallas, right, and I could have got in on that DeJounte Murray trade, I would have taken that 100% if it meant getting rid of Brunson. That's no disrespect to Brunson, but I mean, how do you feeling as a Dallas fan on this, Cade? Because if you re-sign Brunson, your contract or your cap, is a bit tied up. You guys got Christian Wood during the draft. Solid trade there, I think, in terms of the value sent out to get back a guy that, if he's healthy, I think pairs really well with Luka. But do you want to keep Brunson? I mean, how do we feel about this here?
Here's how I feel about it. Is the moment, looking back with hindsight now, the moment Dallas traded for Spencer Dinwiddie is the moment they made up their mind Jalen Brunson wasn't coming back.
I see.
Because Dinwiddie kind of felt like he was going to become the next guy. You had him as a sixth man because Tim Hardaway Jr. was injured. So you had the plans to kind of use this 3 or 4 guard lineup whenever you felt like it. If you wanted to throw Dinwiddie, Brunson, and Luka out there, you could do that.
Right.
And you could play extreme small ball, which we saw Dallas had to do a lot in the playoffs. But I think with some of the rumors I've seen of Luka trying the hardest he can, he's on, he's doing international stuff right now, but every single time they talk to him, he makes it a point to mention Goran Dragic. Goran Dragic.
And that's one of those guys that, is he going to help you win a title in terms of on-court production? No, probably not, considering where he is after all his injuries. But if that winds up being your Udonis Haslem, so to speak,
your leadership guy,
of a guy that your young superstar can rally around, and lean on and say, hey, this guy means a lot to me. I want him on my roster no matter what. You got to do that, right? Yes. I mean, you got to make that happen.
It is the first I know the running joke is GM, LeBron James.
Right.
GM. This is the first Luka GM move we're seeing.
And players are going to follow that.
Yes.
They're going to follow that because they've seen LeBron put down the playbook. And now you could debate at my colleague over there at the radio station, Trent.
Yeah.
We laugh about it a lot. LeBron, the player, all-time great, arguably to some people the best or next to best. Lay GM, as you put it. Boy, I don't know if he's quite the guy.
Yeah.
But either way, these young players, like as you mentioned a second ago, it is the biggest time for them to have the control they want to the point where they could say, hey, I want this guy. Doesn't have to be a relevant guy. And they'll go get him. They'll make it happen to keep that guy happy.
Yeah, so this is, I don't really know how to feel about it, I guess is the best way to put it. On one hand, I'm going to miss Brunson because, like you said, seeing more of an older school game where a guard that can just kind of slash and play a little bully ball for someone who's, 6'3", 6'4",
and not the best athlete, not the biggest guy.
Not the biggest guy in the world, but still able to do it and go in there and just bully some point guards. We saw him do it to Chris Paul, and it was just one that's like, did I just see that right? Did that just happen?
Right.
In a postseason game? Did Jalen Brunson just do that to somebody? And with all the clutch moments he had in the playoffs, especially that first few games against the Utah Jazz without Luka, he's going to be a big detriment. But at the same time, in New York, where he's the number one guy, I don't know if I trust that because you're not going to have a guy like Luka there to take the attention. Who's your biggest threat on the Knicks? Julius Randle?
It is, yeah.
RJ
And Randle's an
Barrett?
all-star, technically.
Technically.
And getting to the Knicks on that end of it, right? Boy, I would hate to be a Knicks fan.
Just in general.
Just in general, because you have put yourself in a hole now. There was one thing when you had Porzingis not quite work out because he had injuries, right? And you realize, okay, we got to move on, got to kind of reshuffle the deck. You get Julius Randle. The Knicks have this disease where they are stuck in the Indiana Pacers mindset of, hey, we've got to put out a team that contends every season. And some fans appreciate that. I get that because they don't want to root for a team that's just given up, if you will, because I hear the chatter online about my Thunder from other Thunder fans and non-Thunder fans about, oh, you guys are disgraceful. It's like, hey, we got hope. But the Knicks are stuck in that mentality of we got to contend. Now you've got yourself in a quarter where your best option is your top two going to be, like you said, Randle and Brunson and RJ Barrett. This is where – and he's still got time, but talk about a pick that needs to pop soon.
Yes.
That guy's got to take the next step. He's got the pedigree.
He does.
And he's shown some flashes, but if they're going to make it work, he has got to take that leap because if they don't, they're going to be stuck essentially back in the same spot they were by the time Porzingis got out of there where they thought, well, we just don't have the guy. We got to reshuffle this deck. Yeah. So, what a horrible spot to be in.
Here's my thing with the Knicks. They are where I want to say the Mavs were 5 years ago. They are in, like you said, this win-now mentality with a roster that can't win now.
Right.
And you have two options. You can either settle for being the 7th seed at best on a great year, finishing as the 7th seed, maybe the 6th seed. This is the Eastern Conference. If your cards fall the right way, you can maybe get the 6th seed. Or do you embrace the tank for a year or two, try to go through the draft, restructure, get some bad contracts out of the way, do whatever you have to do, and come back in a few years? And I know the Knicks have gone through this process before. That's where RJ Barrett came from, getting through that process. But at the same time, I feel like, is it worth it if you're the Knicks? You're seeing all these other teams go around you, Philadelphia, Boston, Miami. Wait your turn. I know you don't like hearing that because it's been 40 years since you've won it, 40, 50
oh,
years.
they've had patience. I know
they don't like being told to wait there, but your time is coming. You just got to be patient. Look at Philadelphia. They suffered for half a decade, and now they're finally back to being relevant again in the NBA. Look at Miami. They were kind of struggling for a little bit, and then you got Dwayne Wade, and that changed everything for them. You got to look at every team does this, with the exception of, someone like the Lakers, who can nearly just buy whoever they want.
Sure.
Whether it be with influence or money.
Or both, yeah.
Yeah, or both. But I don't know what the problem fixer is for New York. I don't know what the main solution is. It feels like they keep putting a Band-Aid on it, but they're never going to actually get the surgery they need. We'll put another Band-Aid on it. Well, you got 15 Band-Aids stacked on top of each other here at this point over the same problem. You've got to find the right solution.
Yeah, and, I think you get teams that are worried of being Philadelphia in the sense that for the folks that were around and seen it, man, those were some rough years leading into getting into Joel Embiid and making him a star and eventually getting Ben Simmons, and for a minute there looked like he was going to be the proper pairing with Embiid. Those were some atrocious years,
They were.
My Thunder are kind of going through it a little bit, although we technically haven't been the worst team or one of the three worst teams in the league last 2 years.
But you also have stars with them right now. You're not like Philadelphia
Sure.
Start,
And we have a lot more assets, and we've got Sam Presti, checkmate.
Yeah.
But I think teams are afraid of being that because, as much as it looks like for now that maybe Philly somewhat succeeded, right? Embiid's the star he's supposed to be. There's still no titles there.
Yeah.
They're still moving pieces. And essentially everybody but Embiid that was part of that whole deal is either gone as far as the player side or out of the front office in terms of the front office side. So I do think, and I'm curious, because the team we haven't touched on yet, kind of mentioned a little bit, I think they might take more of a Memphis Grizzlies route where you essentially you clear the deck, right, the way Memphis did.
Yeah.
They got that second pick. They got Ja. And after Jaw's rookie year, they essentially said, okay, that's our guy, whether, we're 100% on board yet or not, that's our guy. Now we got to start drafting and finding talent to go around him. And that paid off. And Memphis didn't really tank, right? It was more of a quick rebuild, and it worked out. So I think San Antonio, they dished DeJounte Murray to Atlanta, got back Danilo Gallinari, got back 3 first-round picks, including Gallinari, who they'll waive and kind of just let go. And they also let Lonnie Walker walk. So, yeah, I know. Yeah. But they pulled his qualifying offer. He just signed with the Lakers, actually. This, I believe so is what it was, for a 1-year, $6.5 million deal roughly. So, kind of prove a deal there for Lonnie Walker. But San Antonio is going to be real bad next year. You know why? Because Victor Wembanyama. I'm trying to say this right. Wembanyama, thank you. I didn't want to trip over it. That kid.
Don't worry, I'm a Mavs fan. I'm an expert at pronouncing these
He
names
might
right now.
be, folks, when I say the most hyped foreign prospect, this guy might be it. I mean, maybe more. I can't think of another guy off the top of my head. And you don't see it because he's not a high school / college guy right now. But in terms of front offices, there is teams, and San Antonio won't be the only one. There's going to be a couple other teams outside of your Orlando's, Detroit's, Houston, and OKC that say, you know what, it's time to throw our hat in the tank ring because this guy, if you haven't seen him, was about 2-3 years ago. He's standing, I think they had him listed at 6'8", up and coming. He was already kind of considered a top guy for his class. And he played, like we've seen a lot of these bigs like Luka and KD, where he's really fluid with his motion. He could shoot. He could defend. I mean, he's blocking shots like a monster and doing all that. And then he got taller. He's 7'3".
Yes, 7'3".
And still has all that skill. And the fact that he's been able to adapt his body to that quickly, this guy might be the dude that changes the game again like people saw Giannis do, right? And so I think you're going to see some teams, maybe not over the 24-hour period here, but by the time we roll around to next season, you look around and say, oh, there is a couple teams in here that are a little bit more tank-heavy. It might be kind of a top-heavy year for the NBA in that sense.
Yeah, it might be one of those top-heavy and bottom-heavy years, so to speak. Something you don't see a whole lot of, but it's going to be a lot of fun. And looking at some of these other contracts just to get some of the not less important because everyone's important here. You're an NBA player,
and there's some money being spent. So yeah, we got to talk about it.
I mean, talking about Milwaukee a little bit. Bobby Portis returning to the Bucks, a 4-year, $49 million contract there. Anthony Simons, I know we talked about this one before we got on the air. 4-year, $100 million contract there for his extension. Bradley Beal, of course, 5-year, $251 million max there, and Dallas and Milwaukee. Tell me if you've heard this before. Dallas and Milwaukee going after a big guy. It's not Dirk Nowitzki this time. It's JaVale McGee.
Whoa.
A 2-time Shaqtin' MVP.
Coming to Dallas.
He's coming to Dallas. Folks, it's here. We have an MVP in the building. two-time Shaqtin' MVP.
Nice little 3-year, $20 million for JaVale, so you got to appreciate that. Milwaukee, though, getting back Bobby. Kind of had to shell out some extra money for him, I thought, maybe.
Also Joe Ingles.
Joe Ingles picked, and that's a 1-year prove-it deal because remember he's coming off a big injury, so he's got to kind of show he's still there. If I'm Milwaukee, I don't mind just kind of keeping the deck as is. They were banged up in the playoffs. That kind of bit them. If they were healthy, I think you see a different possible result there in the East, right? Not to say Boston couldn't have beat them, but a healthy Milwaukee is a lot different story. And I think the one there that gets me the most is probably Simmons, right?
Yeah.
4 years, $100 million. I mean, I like the guy. He's a solid player.
I don't know if he's worth that much.
Is he worth that much? That's kind of a bet to pay a guy $25 million a year like that. That's just buddy. Now I say that watching the Thunder pay Lou Dort, who was an undrafted,
5-year, $87 million.
You know, but in my mind, Dort earned it. Like he proved it in the bubble a bit, and some of those instances where he might be a Tony Allen type of guy. And if you're going to build a championship team, you need one of those guys.
Yeah.
Marcus Smart proved that, this year. Like, if you're going to get there, you need a guy to help you get there, and you want that type of guy. So I don't mind paying Lou Dort that. Simmons, could play up to it, Who knows?
Yeah, he very well could. Looking at some of these others here, Daniel House Jr., a 2-year, $8.5 million deal with Philadelphia. Tyus Jones, a 2-year, $30 million deal to return to Memphis.
Got kind of paid there, but surprised.
Yeah, a little bit of a surprise there. Amir Coffey, a 3-year, $11 million deal with the Clippers. Damian Jones, a 2-year deal with the Lakers. And let's see if just keep it on the track here. Lou Dort, we already mentioned him. Batum, a 2-year deal to return to the Clippers as well. And Chris Boucher, returning to the Raptors, a 3-year, $35 million contract. I know he was kind of one of the big centers of this free agency if he decided to become the free agent and enter and go somewhere, but instead decided to stay with the Raptors.
Yeah, it's a good get for them. Toronto's kind of in a spot right now where they could keep going with it because it's working at least for now in terms of getting to the playoffs, but Fred VanVleet's going to have to take a big leap. Or Pascal Siakam. I think Siakam's probably the more likely of the two.
I would think so.
To really take that leap into stardom. And that's what they're banking on. I don't mind the deal there. 3 years, 35 for a guy like that. Probably pretty solid. Because he proved to be solid whenever Pascal was a bit banged up, right? You had some big games from him. So you got to have that depth. And something that we haven't mentioned that we need to mention here is the NBA before free agency this week let teams know the cap room for next year is going to be I believe it was in the $120 million range,
somewhere in there,
which is about an $11 million increase from last year, which means the league's doing really good in revenue, folks.
It does.
And that means bigger contracts for your role guys. I mean, that's Tyus Jones to say 2 years, $30 million surprised me a bit, but that's probably the going rate now for a guy like that.
That probably is. I would not disagree with you there on that. And looking kind of some more deals to look at here. Malik Monk, a 2-year, $19 million deal to join the Sacramento Kings. So Monk officially getting off the Lakers ship to go to Sacramento. I never thought I'd see the day.
We knew ye well, Malik Monk, because that's where careers go to die, Sacramento. In my book, worst run franchise right now in the NBA, by far.
I mean, they're approaching some intriguing levels just in terms of worst run franchise in sports. If they're not there already.
You mess up the relationship with Derek Cousins. Then you take a guy like De'Aaron Fox, who I really liked.
Yeah.
And is he where he needs to be? I don't think he is, You mess up Marvin Bagley. I mean, good grief.
Also, picking Marvin Bagley over Luka, that's got to be.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be looked at.
All-time oofs list right there.
It's going to be a bad one when we look back on it.
Yeah. And the other thing with the Kings, I know, you got Sabonis, which is neat, but you gave up Halliburton. And
who was the one guy I thought, they did right with him. That was a great – I love Tyrese Halliburton. Don't get me wrong. Sabonis, played for the Thunder. I thought he's got some talent. He's got the pedigree. His dad was an amazing Euro star before he came over to the NBA late in his career. But I'd take Halliburton. I mean, I feel like Sabonis just kind of is what he is, which is solid, but he's not my number one. And that's what they treated him like for Sacramento. So
yeah, I mean, the Kings will continue to be the Kings. They'll do something crazy. You never know what they're going to do. We'll see how Keegan Murray turns out for Sacramento this year. I know people are already trying to look at that one with, Ivy was right there.
Yeah. I mean, in the same respect, though, I mean, I was doing that when the Thunder had the chance to Jabari Smith.
Yeah.
Didn't take him. They must – I always say, in Presti we trust, baby. So, hopefully Chet is that guy because he's going to have to be.
Hopefully he is for the sake of the Thunder. Because if he isn't, oh, man.
Oh, it's going to be rough.
That's going to be rough. And Patty Mills getting a 2-year, $14.5 million deal to return to the Nets. Brunson, once again, was armed with a 5-year, $106 million offer from the Mavs. But as we learned, I believe it was Mark Stein reporting it, that Brunson was going to sign with the Knicks anyway. Dallas could have thrown all the money in the world at him, and it wasn't going to change a thing.
But as we have right now, there is no official deal yet, so we'll see if that breaks kind of over the rest of the show, because apparently Brunson, as we were getting ready to go on, was talking to the Knicks. So
yeah, the official meeting happening there. I would expect an announcement sometime tonight. And getting back to it, Lakers signing Lonnie Walker IV to a 1-year, $6.5 million contract that we mentioned earlier on in the show. Nick Claxton, a 2-year, $20 million deal to return to the Nets.
And see, Cade, we just mentioned the Mills and now Claxton deal. If Brooklyn knows they're shipping out KD and Kyrie both and planning to just go into the the Victor sweepstakes, if you will, they aren't acting like it. That's 2 contracts they could have kept off the books and just cleared everything out. So I'm kind of intrigued to see what they get back for Durant/Kyrie. Maybe they're trying to wiggle their way to get a star, Yeah,
they might be looking at this more of as a retooling, not a rebuilding.
Right, yeah, yeah.
So that's going to be something to keep an eye on. And then the Lakers, 1-year veteran minimum for Troy Brown Jr. Veteran minimum for a 22-year-old doesn't really sound correct. It's not what you think of when you hear those two phrases together. But, hey, NBA, anything's possible.
Hey, that's going to be –
I'm a 20-year-old veteran. I've been here on this earth 20 years. I've served my time.
Served your time. That's going to be the Austin Reeves special in about 2 years. You wait.
I mean, there you go. That might be what Reeves does out there. Hey, maybe he goes to the Thunder or the Mavs. We'll take him.
I don't want him on OKC.
Oh, you don't want
even
him on
as an Oklahoma fan?
As an OU fan, you still don't want him on?
I'm good.
Okay. I mean, my whole deal was always as a kid, if we got all the Oklahoma guys, if we had a team of Trae Young, Buddy Hield, and Blake Griffin, it wouldn't be amazing by any means, but it'd still be neat to see just – as an OU, be like, these are our 3 players.
Oh,
and
man.
then Austin Reeves is like, these are our 4 players.
God bless. Austin Reeves. Don't get me started.
And then JaVale McGee, 3-year deal with Dallas. We already talked about that. I mean, hey, 3-time NBA champion.
And,
I'm just saying.
More importantly, as you mentioned, 2-time Shaq to the full champ.
Yeah.
Higher honor in my mind.
It is a pretty high honor. I'd have to say. Even though I don't think he liked it, still pretty high honor. And looking at some more news that has come in. Juan Toscano Anderson has agreed to a deal with the Lakers. So the defending NBA champion there, signing a deal with the Lakers. Does not say how long it is, but this was about, not that long ago, about an hour ago.
If it means they don't have to trot out Dwight Howard in garbage time, that's probably a good thing.
Probably. And then the Sixers, 3-year deal, $33 million for P.J. Tucker, like we talked about there. Anthony Gill signing a 2-year deal with the Wizards. Gill, 3.7 points in 70 games for the past 2 years. Wizards just trying to keep their bench intact there.
Yeah, you keep depth. You got to do it.
Yeah. And Orlando Magic guard Gary Harris agreeing on a 2-year, $26 million extension to stay there. He averaged 10 a game with the Magic, was acquired from the Nuggets. Got to keep your solid bench guys.
Hey, good for Gary because he kind of got a raw deal there in Denver. He got banged up, he got injured, and then he had a couple guys, being the hungry dogs, if you will, kind of took his spot, and they ran out of room for him. So nothing wrong with getting paid. What, $13 million a year there? You may not win a lot of games, but I'll take my mills.
Yeah, you take $13 million just to do that. And we just got it here. Woj reporting it. New Woj tweet just dropped 1 minute ago. Kyle Anderson, a 2-year, $18 million deal to join the Timberwolves.
Man, the Timberwolves there, that's another team that they probably feel like they're close, right?
Yeah.
Because, you got Karl Anthony Towns, who is, for all purposes for a lot of people, he's a superstar, all-star level guy. Now, where he ranks kind of in the top of the top, that's debatable. But I think Minnesota, if Anthony Edwards is able to take another leap like he did this season, they're going to be in a really good spot because you're going to have your two guys there, and then you take a Kyle Anderson, a Tyus Jones, some of those kind of role guys that you could, put around those two. That could be something. Anthony Edwards, I think, has kind of surprised me in the fact that he's really added a lot to his game quickly. He was kind of a bit raw coming out, and you see some of those flashes, but what he's been able to do in such a short time, you got to really like that for Minnesota. The question will be, though, does Karl Anthony Towns get to the point where he realizes, A, he's not the guy, and will he be okay with that?
Yeah, and another one is D'Angelo Russell. That's another.
Yes, I forget about D'Angelo Russell, who's quietly very solid. Yeah,
between him possibly getting traded to New Orleans. New Orleans, as we've seen on ESPN the past few shows, I guess you could say that all two of them they've done today.
Sure.
They really seemed intended on, hey, Kevin Durant to New Orleans could be a pretty real possibility. New Orleans has the pieces if they want to do that.
Right.
It's just, does Brooklyn want to, go for Zion or something like that, or Brandon Ingram being the face of their franchise for a few years? And I don't know if that's a risk you want to take unless you want to be, throw out the tank commander lineup of Ingram and Simmons or something like that and, just let it ride for a few. Try to get Wembanyama maybe. I don't know what the Nets want to do. Maybe they would see that as a contender move or just make the playoffs type of move. I don't know. There's so many possibilities to roll with there. But getting back to Sham's tweet, as of 19 minutes ago, Kevin Knox, a 2-year, $6 million deal with the Detroit Pistons.
Man, that's another guy that hadn't really got a fair shake, right? I kind of liked him a lot coming out of college.
By the way, another guy drafted by the Knicks.
Yeah.
Just got to throw that in.
Yeah. And probably they reached for him. He was a bit raw. Didn't really develop him. So he's kind of been struggling to find his place. Maybe Detroit will be a home. It's a good young core coming together, if you will. By the way, Cade, free hot take for you here. You ready?
Okay.
Fresh off the press.
Okay.
I am out on Zion Williamson being a top superstar.
You're out on.
I'm out on him. He's not the guy. He is not the guy.
Well, this is kind of funny because we had this discussion on our last show. We were talking about this with New Orleans. Do you really want to make Zion the guy? Like, think about it. He barely's played. You're going to be forced to play small ball forever with him because you have a 6'7", 6'8" power forward. Yes, he can play center. He can do all that, but not the greatest 3-point shooter in the world. He's a strong guy. He can get you rebounds. He can do all of that, but man, I mean, you raise a point. You do raise a good point there. I would give him another year or two just to see. But at the same time, I see where you're coming from.
The only problem with that is you're signing him to a contract at that point. You've got to sign him.
You got to sign him.
Are you saying, hey, this is the guy? Now, the other issue for the Pelicans on that is if you do part ways with him, now all of a sudden, other players, executives, agents are looking at you and saying, hold on a minute. You have now shipped off 2 guys that you said, this is our guy, Anthony Davis and Zion.
Well, technically number 3 if you want to count Chris Paul.
Chris Paul, you can throw him in there if you want to too as well.
This is just a New Orleans thing.
Yeah. So, how bad does that look on your franchise? You want to talk about not getting players to come to you for agency? Yeah. You're already a small market team, which is tough.
Yeah.
Now you've got a reputation all of a sudden of, they kind of say a guy's their superstar and then they just ship them off.
Yeah, that's why I think you got to give Zion a chance here. I understand it's going to be a brutal look if he doesn't pan out or he gets injured and continues to stay injured and things like that, or if he just doesn't play well or doesn't mesh with Ingram and McCollum. But I think you have to give him that fair shake at least.
Right.
You saw Philadelphia do this with Joel Embiid. The first 3 or 4 years he was injured the whole time, which kind of ended up helping them in the tank process if they could have drafted some guys and developed them. But you've got to be able to trust him. And I think that's something, I know you just said being a small market team.
Yeah.
Anthony Davis getting shipped off, Chris Paul getting shipped off. New Orleans kind of has that reputation for this is where superstars go to get traded to the Lakers, kind of like Orlando. This is where people go to
The New Age Orlando.
Yeah, the new Orlando for greener pastures, a.k.a. anywhere but New Orleans. I think you have to give it to him. Even if you don't want to, unless you can find some really crafty way that the Nets will accept a deal for whether it be Kyrie or Durant or something, I think you have to keep him. I think you give him, here's your 4 or 5 year contract. If it doesn't pan out, I hope you're playing well enough that we can pitch you somewhere else.
Yeah. Well, the one thing New Orleans has done well, at least going into this spot, is that I think they've padded themselves a bit to where, I don't think Brandon Ingram plus C.J. McCollum is going to win you a title. And in a lot of cases, other than the miracle run we saw them have in the play-in, it's tough to be consistent to win games with that roster, right, in a competitive West. But it at least gives you a scenario where Zion's maybe not quite what he was or, is working his way back. You've got some guys to pick him up there. It's not all on him. So, you could kind of give him, I guess, a little bit more of a cushion if you do take the re-sign route. So that's one thing they've done well with.
That is one thing they've done well with him. Well, we're going to kind of cool it for free agency for now. Things are starting to slow down a little bit. We had the initial, 2.5 hour explosion of news. But now it's time to get to the other thing that happened.
Oh, man. And this is,
we
out of left field.
Some would say the death of college football as we know it.
People are crying tears out there, man.
People are saying this is the end of really college sports in general. People are sad that, this is the end of the Rose Bowl being important in the world of college football.
As if it was.
I've never seen people cry. Listen, people are crying about a bowl game that no one cares about unless you're a Pac-12 or Big Ten fan.
Yeah, crying about a bowl game that even half the Pac-12 and Big Ten fans complain about.
Yeah, here's the thing, and I saw people, I'm not going to name names, but...
Oh, we could name names, oh no.
I'm not going to name names, but I'm going to say I saw way too many people and this has been the past 5 years. This isn't a today thing. This is a lot of people that I would never expect to see it, losing their minds about the sanctity of the Rose Bowl and how... the Rose Bowl is the most single important game in the history of college football. No, the national championship game is the most important. When the Rose Bowl hosts it, yeah, sure. But I see so many teams, oh, man, I just want to see us play in the Rose Bowl one time. I don't. If it's not the national championship game, I don't want to see OU there. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And I'm granted, blue blood take, but... I will say that I am a privileged fan. I get to see my team win 10 games most years. Most people don't grow up with that, but I don't understand this crying about, well, this is the end of college football. College football is not going to go away. Yeah, people don't like that it's beginning to be more like the NFL, and I understand that in a way. You want to keep your traditions and things like that. ESPN did not do this. This weird conspiracy theory.
Hold on a minute.
This weird conspiracy theory
Cade.
that ESPN and Fox have single-handedly killed college football. The universities agreed to it too. ESPN didn't say, "Hey, OU Texas, we're going to force you into the SEC now."
No, not in the sense that they didn't outright do it, but let me tell you where there is a little bit of credence to that conspiracy theory.
Yeah, there is some truth.
Let's talk about the numbers here, okay? So, when Oklahoma and Texas made their announcement, people started looking back at the fiscal year 2020, 2021 for these conferences. Folks, let me remind you, now this, some of this is COVID's fault, but the gap is not necessarily COVID's fault. Mm-hmm. In the fiscal year 2020, okay, in terms of league revenue, if we're talking about the Power Five, the Big Ten and the SEC both made, the Big Ten was over $750 million. They were at $786. The SEC, $733. They were close. Then you get a $200 million drop-off to the next highest conference, which was the ACC at that point. Then you get the Pac-12. And then from the Pac-12 to the Big 12, who was the last in the fiscal year 2020, just in that gap, there was nearly a $100 million revenue difference there.
Yes.
And when you compare it from the Big 12 to the top of the Big 10, we're talking about nearly $400 million of revenue of a difference. And you know why that is?
A lot of it's TV money.
TV contracts. So when you have ESPN and Fox, not saying, once again, you're right. They didn't say, hey, OU, you've got to go to the SEC. Hey, Texas, you've got to go to the SEC. But when the reports come out that USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten will make them $100 million a year in this new TV contract if they are a part of it, as opposed to just about $30 million in the Pac-12. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying ESPN and Fox are totally blamed, but I do kind of side on the people there that blame them a bit.
Yeah. See, the other thing I don't understand is this the college football playoff was a mistake.
No, it was not. It's been more money for college football.
Into this theory. I've seen that this conspiracy theory leads to we should go back to the BCS system, which to some people leads to we should go back to the bowl coalition of the 90s.
Well, it's what it is, and this is. I'm not trying to pick on anybody that's from the older era, right? Where when it comes to.
But these are young people saying this.
Sure, well, but they hear it from the older generation, and so it kind of gets transferred on, right? Look, folks. If you thought college football beyond, I would say, 1960, had any sort of legitimate sanctity as an amateur sport, you're not paying attention. Yeah. As soon as these, we got into the modern era, as soon as 1970 on hit, essentially, I mean, we got the Pony Express, we got USC.
The entire Southwest Conference.
I mean, the money's been there, all right? So if you're still freaking about the NIL stuff and, oh, my God, we're paying guys. Two things, all right? Any of these athletes, whether it's college football or women's polo or whoever, in the NCAA, whatever NCAA sport, these are all people that are over the age of 18, right? Mm-hmm. And in this country, we are in a capitalistic society.
That's true.
We are told, get your bag, get your money, do what you got to do it. Yeah, as long as it's legal. Yeah. Don't be doing illegal stuff. Don't do illegal stuff.
We do not recommend that on this show.
Right. But all these kids are doing is cashing in on that money that has been generated not for years, not for decades, but for generations off their backs. I mean, generations.
Yes.
And so they're cashing in on that. I can't blame them. I can't. If you're working a job out there, okay, and I'm paying you, let's say $25,000, right? Somebody comes up to you.
What in the world are you doing paying me $25,000? That's nothing.
Sure. But just as a general number. And somebody walks up and says, hey, you know what? Just to get your services, I'm going to double your pay. In the world that we've grown up in, everybody says you do that. Yeah. But all of a sudden these kids cash in on that and we say, well, you can't do that. You're desecrating the sport.
Yeah, you're supposed to stay loyal to where you first
No, you take care. Yeah. And I get the people complaining, well, it's selfish. It's turning your back on a commitment. And I can understand that. Yeah. The problem with that is we just saw what Lincoln Riley did and his entire staff. Yeah. And people hated on him for it, but that kind of goes away, right? Like USC fans are all over that. Yeah. And so they don't hold that against them. Right, yeah. So we don't do that to coaches, unless it happens to us. But when we see it happen to other coaches, we're like, it's whatever. It's just they're coaches. It's business. Yeah. It's just business for these kids, man. Yeah. I mean, that's how it is.
I really don't understand it. And I think this is going to be the big card, I guess you could say, USC and UCLA. Because OU Texas was the first, I guess, stone thrown, I guess you could say. This is the first shot fired. Here comes the avalanche now. USC and UCLA is going to do it. I've seen reports. Notre Dame is now looking at maybe joining.
And Notre Dame's a special case, right? Because they're independent in football, and they've got their tradition and their rivalries that they've been able to build because they're scheduling independently. Yeah. But how long does that stay profitable for Notre Dame?
And that's
they're private. They've got the money. We know that. They've got their own network. But how long does independence really stay profitable?
Well, that gets to my point. I saw a source earlier today. I saw a tweet. I can't remember the guy, but he was interviewing a source at Notre Dame, and they said, listen, it's not as profitable being an independent anymore as it used to be.
Absolutely not.
And here's the other thing. Because they're an independent in football, they can join any conference anytime and no buyout needed.
Right.
If they move from the ACC to the Big Ten in every other sport, they'd have to pay that buyout. But in football, that's not the case. They can move whenever they want. And I think this is the Big Ten's ploy because you can say, look, we have USC now. We have Michigan. We have Michigan State. We have Purdue. We have 4 of your main rivals plus the opportunity to play Ohio State and Penn State.
Right, which are dream matchups, right?
And you have access to New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles.
Right.
And you're one of the biggest national brands in the history of America, basically. Everyone knows who Notre Dame is.
Absolutely.
I don't see why you don't take that deal if you're Notre Dame.
I mean, if you don't, I think at that point it's just ego of your brand, right?
Yeah,
You're saying,
I think
well,
it's just,
we're Notre Dame,
yeah,
so we can do what we need to do.
And I think the Big Ten has called their shot. The arms race between the Big Ten and the SEC is on. If you didn't believe it was truly going to happen,
now
it's going to happen.
Shots fired, like you said.
The only thing left to see, we've seen the Big 12 take a shot. We've seen the Pac-12 take a shot. The only conference left is the ACC to truly deal with this mess. And I've seen Clemson, Florida State, Miami, Virginia Tech, North Carolina, Duke. They're all starting to be linked places now.
Yeah.
The Big Ten, there was an article I read, they're targeting Stanford, they're targeting Cal, they're targeting North Carolina, they're targeting Duke. First of all, how amazing would that be for basketball, have Michigan State, UCLA, North Carolina, and Duke in the same conference?
I mean,
yes, travel would be a nightmare. There's a whole lot of logistical nightmares that go with this, but the money outweighs all of that.
Yeah.
The eyeballs you get for those games of, oh my goodness, UCLA's going to Cameron Indoor. Here comes North Carolina coming up to the I-Zone. Some of these fun matchups you don't really get to see outside of one time in November and maybe the tournament if you're lucky.
Right. Yeah, maybe, right.
And seeing it guaranteed every year, maybe even a home and home.
I mean, it'd be chaos for one, but yeah, that's what these teams are eyeballing, right? Or I say these teams, the conferences are eyeballing is, hey, we're no longer worried about the geographical aspect.
Yeah.
And that's the one argument that maybe the college football fans out there that are a bit upset about this move probably has the best case is that
that's what I've heard.
College football built its reputation off the regional aspect. I mean, it was the SEC teams, and a colleague brought this up to me and pointed out well. Even the bad SEC teams, your Vanderbilts and stuff like that, and football wise, they're still on board with the SEC and proud and wearing it strongly because it's a regional thing, right? That means excellence.
Yes.
For them. Even if it's not necessarily football, they've, Vanderbilt of the world, they've got baseball and other sports, but I mean, that to them is excellent. So you maybe lose a little bit of the regional aspect, right? Because that conferences mean something for a lot of people and for a lot of those teams. So that's the only downfall, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and see, this is an interesting conversation because I've talked to older OU fans, and the one thing I heard that kind of stood out to me when I talked to some was all this regionalism died when the Big Eight died.
Sure.
When the Southwest Conference and the Big Eight merged and you let the Texas teams come into your home, move everything to Dallas, and pretty much take over the conference overnight, that is when all conference pride died to some of them.
Right.
Some of the playing for them. And so I'd argue that moment, the death of the Southwest Conference and the merger of the Big Eight to Southwest, Arkansas to the SEC, all of that, the independents starting to separate and join their conferences, that would be what I would consider the nationalization of college football when it really started to take off and wasn't more of a regional-based thing anymore.
Sure.
And so for me, growing up in that post-merger generation, I guess I don't really feel any regional pride. I look at it, no, I'm not going to root for Texas Tech just because we play them every year. I see them more as an enemy than I do as an adversary as well as an enemy, a potential recruiting threat, not as, oh yeah, those people who are 6 hours from us. I hope they do well. No, I don't.
Now, see, I'm a little bit more old school in this sense.
Yeah.
Like, I've always been, like, NCAA tournament, for example. If Oklahoma's not in it, I want the Big 12 teams to do well to show, oh, hey, we had a strong conference. Because to me, I kind of got a little, especially, in the recent years, a little bit, I wouldn't say offended, but I maybe took it a tad personal hearing the, Big 12's weak, the SEC's so much better. Of course, now that doesn't matter because we're SEC, baby, SEC. But no,
Listen,
that stuff, and maybe because of my job a little bit too, you get to know the area a bit.
Yeah.
You do kind of get to where you root for some of those kids, but it is what it is.
I have no problem rooting for the kids. It's just
I get what you're saying. Yeah, I don't know. It's just one of those deals. But now we memed about it. In the early 2010s of you're gonna have 4 conferences and that's it in Division I, and now we're talking about super conferences yet again.
Now we're talking about what I like to call the Big 2 and the Mid 3. That's what my official term for it.
The mid 3 and the ugly, 7 or 6?
Yeah, the mid 3 and the group of 5 still exist. You got the Power 2, the SEC and Big 10, the mid 3, which is whatever the Pac-12 becomes, the ACC and the Big 12, because everyone knows who the top dogs are now.
Yeah.
All the blue bloods have kind of coagulated now in these 2 spots. That's where they're going to be until, they all decide to merge together and become this giant, 60-team league if they ever decide to do that. And you get all these other slightly better mid-3 teams come in.
Right. Well, it's like talked about to start the segment, follow the money, right?
Yes.
I mean, I talked about the dollar disparity between the Big Ten, SEC, and everybody else. Like, that means something. Those dollar amounts, you see them and you go, oh, that's crazy. You could. I don't know what the Big Ten slogan would be for it,
I don't know. We got snow games. Enjoy them. I don't know. That's a selling point for me. I can't wait to see USC take on Michigan State.
Oh, God.
2:30 November afternoon, 6 inches of snow on the ground. USC players have no idea what they're doing.
Good
Michigan State lines up with 2 tight ends and a fullback.
2 fullbacks.
Yeah, 2 fullbacks. They show up without a quarterback. They're going to run 3 fullbacks. They're going to do whatever they want. It's November in the Big Ten. There's no logic behind it. You have 2 plays, run ball or run ball with fullback. That's your 2 plays, and it's amazing to watch.
I want to up you by. Can't wait to see Lincoln Riley on the sideline in Iowa losing his absolute mind because they're down 16-14 to the Cyclones.
Listen.
Or to the Hawkeyes, excuse me.
I can't wait to see USC October 11 a.m. at Purdue.
Oh, man.
Down 31-24.
The jet lag, that will be blamed.
It is absolutely going to be crazy. The other thing I want to talk about, just as a sort of something that made me laugh, because several people I knew called this from the beginning, and I believe it as well. Rest in peace to the College Football Alliance.
Oh, yes.
The greatest alliance in college football history.
Most powerful alliance.
Big Ten, for those of you who don't remember, last year, right after OU and Texas announced they would join the SEC, the Big Ten, Pac-12, and ACC all announced they would form an alliance.
To better the state of college football.
Yes.
That was their state of mission.
But they might as well have just said, we don't like the SEC, and we don't like them because they added OU, Texas. Also, sorry, Big 12, you can't join. That was basically what it was. It was an anti-SEC pack meant to prevent college football playoff expansion, which I don't understand because, wouldn't you want that? Why are you throwing $500 million away because SEC bad? That was their whole talking point. And then well, it's ESPN's fault.
Well, and now
you have
yeah.
ESPN's not putting the gun to your head to vote for this.
No, yeah.
I don't understand the whole saga with that. And then it was, oh, yeah, we're going to do scheduling alliances, and we're going to have all these teams play each other. Okay, never mind, we're not going to do that. But we're going to form a strong partner. They're just not even saying words at this point. They're saying phrases that don't mean anything. We're going to embrace strong partnerships with our alliance members. Okay, that means nothing. And then, finally today, you get the cannibalization of the alliance itself with the Pac-12 essentially being chopped up by the Big Ten. So that's done. That's just not a thing anymore. And the Big Ten's already actively hunting ACC members, too.
Well, and see, then we figured out the true messaging of the alliance, right? It wasn't all the phrases. It wasn't all the strong opposition, as you mentioned, of these SEC bad. No, is what it was. It was a honeypot by the Big Ten to get in there, slide in the DMs. They got in there with the Pac-10, ACC, talked to their top schools and said, hey, we really value a lot more than your conference does.
Yeah. Would you like to earn more money doing the same thing?
They sweet-talked the crap out of them all to pull this off. That's what it is. That's what the alliance was. Talk about a 4D chess move there from the Big Ten.
Yeah, it is an absolutely amazing thing. I want to scroll back because there are a few sources I saw earlier today. I saw a rumor, and I think it was a meme, I'm 95% sure is a meme that said Stanford and Cal are looking at joining the Ivy League.
Yeah.
But 5% of me believes they would do that, though.
Stanford absolutely would. Stanford does not care. They do not care. Cal, I think, pretends to care, so they wouldn't just because they think it would look bad.
Yeah, I don't know what it would be right now. Heather Dinich, there we go, 3 hours ago. A source told me that if Notre Dame were to withdraw from the ACC, it can play football wherever it wants. Would have to pay an exit fee and grant a rights fees for the other sports, but it doesn't sound like they would for football. And then looking at some of these other ones right now, trying to see. I know Oregon and Washington to the Big Ten has already been hinted at and rumored at. I saw one that said the Big Ten might go after Missouri, which would be an ultimate just kind of trying to be a power move from the Big Ten that we can take from anybody.
Would the SEC really try to stop them? It would be like,
no,
oh, no,
they'd be like, listen,
don't take Missouri.
Yeah, would that valuable St. Louis market, you know. we love Kansas City and St. Louis. That's why we hold a whopping 0 events there.
God.
We put the basketball tournament there one year. You know, you could put the baseball, Busch Stadium's right there. You can hold the SEC baseball tournament there. I'm just saying as an OU fan and a Cardinals fan, I would love to see OU and Busch one day. I'm sure Ole Miss fans wouldn't mind it either. That's in their home territory right there.
No, but you brought up Oregon. That's the program that's kind of left holding the bag here for a minute. Now I think they're going to find a spot, because they've got that Nike money. That's important. You want to talk about a brand and a revenue stream right there.
We gotta. This is 5 hours ago from another source here. In the wake of this, Kansas is officially making a push. Big East 2025, independent in football.
And to be honest, Cade, I think for Kansas, that might be the right move.
It
just
honestly might. Just go the UConn route.
Yeah, I mean,
just be a basketball school.
Accept what you are. You could still probably find a way to schedule Texas to beat them once every year in football. Hey, that could happen.
Some things just never change.
Yeah, I mean, that's tradition, so you could find a way to include that one. But, no, I mean, I think that's probably actually a good move for Kansas. Now, I will say, I don't know if I'd be hitting up the Big East. I'd be calling up the ACC.
Yeah.
You want to talk about some marquee matchups.
Yeah, I mean, you very well could do that. I mean, just thinking about some of those matchups, man, you'd get some highly intense basketball games out of that. But just think about that. Kansas versus Duke every year. Kansas, North Carolina.
Twice a year.
Yeah. Kansas going up to the Carrier Dome to play Syracuse.
Oh, my goodness.
Something like that. You get some insane matchups there. I mean, that's the thing that I know a lot of people, it's the regionalism of, yeah, that'd be cool, but you can do that in non-conference. Well, I mean, we're in a way different world than we were back then.
And
Ever since OU and Georgia opened Pandora's box in the 80s with the TV rights deal in 1982, I want to say when that was. I think that was when the court case was, but that was really the opening Pandora's box. I'll use the same analogy twice here. Pretty much just opening it up and letting your imagination run wild. Anything is possible now. Why not have Kansas go independent? At this point, why not?
ESPN would press the button 100 times out of 100 because you want to talk about making, your sport marketable. College basketball as a whole, for the most part, seems like it's still in an okay spot. There's reports of struggling, but if you want to talk about a way to make it, kind of get back to some old school people actually care in terms of that, those fan bases would care enough to push you kind of to a good level if you're, Kansas or whoever they decide to join up with.
Yeah, and so I guess the final question here as I skim for any NBA news to see if we have any before we end on this, because these are the main two things to talk about today. Here we go. We got a little bit. DeLon Wright, 2-year, $16 million deal to sign with the Wizards. I mean, good pickup there for Washington. Get a solid point guard in DeLon Wright. That's about the last free agency news we're going to get.
Okay, let me ask you a serious question.
Okay, serious question.
In the last decade, when has DeLon Wright been relevant? Since he
played for the Mavs for like 1 year, and that's the only reason I remember him. He can be solid at times. He was solid for the Mavs for like 3 weeks.
He popped off at the beginning of his career, and then has not done nothing since. Every time his name pops up, I'm like, wait a minute, this guy is still in the league? What is going on?
Well, hey, I was trying to be nice. I was trying to say he was solid.
No holds barred, man. We're here.
Okay. Well, I guess the question in the night for you then would be, if we had to predict what the next major college football move was going to be. We've seen OU in Texas. We've seen USC and UCLA. Where is the next move going to come, and who's it going to be?
At this point, I think this treads more on the conferences getting these brands. We talked about Notre Dame. I think in my mind that's probably the most likely one, although the problem is Notre Dame still probably has some cushion, in terms of time, right? They could still wait a couple years, see where the dust settles by the time you get all these moves in 2024 and 2025, and then tag along. So they're not urgent right now. I would say the next urgency is going to be probably the ACC, to make sure that they're not losing any of their big brands, not so much on the football side, but like you mentioned for the basketball side. And then after that, I mean, how many calls you want to talk about stepping into a room on fire? Good luck, Brett Yormark, August 1st, taking over as the Big 12 commissioner, because, I mean,
you're walking into this situation.
Yeah, so, do we get a quote-unquote alliance between the Pac-12, what's left of it, and the Big 12 now? Like, where do you go if you're, if you're a Boise State out there or Fresno State, where you've kind of had a good national profile, decent enough for a mid-major or a non-Power 5 in football, if you will? Do you push now to the Pac-12 and say, hey, we're here. We've been wanting to get in. Screw your academic standards. Get us in there.
Yeah.
What do you do? That's going to be the real moves, I think. What happens to all these little, the non-power conferences? We already saw it a little bit when the OU Texas domino fell. But what happens to your Mountain West, your Conference USA? What continues to happen to the AAC and those schools? I think that you'll see that movement first before we get probably another big, Oregon or a Stanford or somebody like that. So
I think if we get the next major move, the kind of underrated one that I keep seeing kind of like hinted at if the cards go the right way. Well, let's say, for example, Washington and Oregon leave the Pac-12.
Right.
Let's say they go to the Big Ten.
They get dragged along,
Yeah, they get dragged somewhere. What do you do if you're a Washington State or an Oregon State? Some of these places that really don't have anywhere to go, where your two options are probably merge with the Big 12 or struggle in the Mountain West. Or if the Mountain West wants to get absorbed by the Pac-12, that could maybe also happen. But I keep seeing people trying to push for now a Pac-12, Big 12 merger and thinking create the third super conference, so to speak, of all these teams that kind of are the orphans, I guess you could say, left behind on the bigger conference movements and kind of merging to create their own little league.
Well, and I think in that sense, you want to be the first to do it rather than being the last, right? So we talked about the ACC. I think they're in a spot where they're going to have to play defense the longest, and that may burn them the most, right?
I think so.
Because they're going to be restricted on their movement because they're saying, hey, we got to keep everybody together. We got all of our basketball tradition. We're still there with Clemson as football powerhouse, even though they had a little bit of a down year this past year. And I think for, Pac-12, Big 12, what's left of it now, they're looking at it and saying, we flirted with this, a decade ago, and we didn't do it then. But now you look back and say, well, we should have done it. You should have just went ahead and do it. So
the Pac-16 was a legitimate possibility at one point.
Yeah.
I still remember the day that someone told one of my friends, this is happening. OU's in the Pac-12 now. And I remember thinking, that's never going to happen. OU's not going to leave the Big 12. And, a decade later, here we are. Getting ready to leave in a few years, whether it be 2025, 2024, 2023. We'll eventually move on. I mean, such is the cycle of college sports. These things you would never think possible happen with regularity.
By the way, what a grand finish to the Larry Scott legacy.
Yeah, that's
oh my gosh.
True. Larry Scott was truly the protector of the Pac-12.
Oh, man, till the end, wasn't it?
All you had to do was not fire Larry Scott. You should have just let him stay commissioner forever.
As crazy as that dude is.
They could have kept expanding the Pac-12 network in Australia and China, but not the U.S. But he kept the conference together.
He did.
So, I mean, I've already seen Pac-12 people doing that. We know if Larry Scott didn't do this and got Texas and OU aboard and all that, I was like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We can't go back and fix that now.
Oh, man. Oh, Larry.
Yeah. That's probably as good of a note to end on with Larry Scott jokes. So once again, as always, I appreciate you tuning in. Always a wonderful time here. I'd like to thank Tyler for coming on today, filling in, doing more than necessary.
Nah.
Way more than necessary.
Having a lot of fun, man.
That's the important thing, having a lot of fun. As always, for Tyler Riggs, I'm Cade Kennedy. If you enjoyed what you heard this evening, be sure to give us a follow here on Twitch. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok at NWTV7. And if you liked what you heard as well, be sure when this video comes out on YouTube, whether it be the Guys Who Stare at Stats or the NWTV7 YouTube channel, you subscribe to those, like the video, comment, do whatever you will, spread it amongst your friends, do whatever you want to do there. But until then, we will be here maybe Tuesday, maybe Thursday. I have no idea. Things are going to get really weird with the schedule, so the only way to know is to stay tuned and follow our social medias to find out. And until next time, have a good one, everybody.